This is getting cut. We're starting over because I just realized I'm implicating myself in a crime.
A crime.
And to everybody tuning in right now, this is where the thing starts, so you don't get to hear about that. But completely unrelated. It's interesting, I've been going through some music lately. And right. It's just interesting to me that there are tracks that are, I've always known this song. And then you find out, like you've been listening to the 3-minute version of what is actually a 10-minute album cut. And, you had no idea because it's the only thing you've ever been fed.
Yeah.
Been finding a lot of those. Probably my favorite one that it unlocked this whole world of music that I didn't even know existed, which is re-recordings. So if you're a fan of Taylor Swift, she's re-recording all of her albums right now. But that's not what I'm talking about. She's re-recording them to be sonically accurate to her old albums. This is bands from the 60s and 70s who, for some reason, in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, re-recorded their songs with a completely different orchestration, different band, whole thing. And I found a lot of these songs that, are re-recordings, but I didn't know that. So one of the key ones for me is a re-recording from, 1974 or 1981 of Archie Bell and the Drells, Tighten Up, which is
Tighten Up.
That song, the one that I've had on my iPod for years and years and years, one of my favorite songs, and that version of it turns out, is the re-recording, because I found the original version, which is also great, but I found the original version and I was like, oh, I guess, all right, I guess that this is a thing that they did. Then I started finding out, I had a Herman's Hermits greatest hits album. Half of that was re-recorded, apparently. So all the Herman's Hermits stuff that I grew up listening to was actually not the Herman Hermits stuff from the 60s. Yeah. And then you go back and you listen to that, and it sounds like it's coming through a tin can, and it's awful. And you're like, what the hell happened here? I guess they got popular, and then they got money. Yeah. They got that Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter movie about the dog.
So they a lot of the punk genre is like that.
Oh, dude, punk does it all the time.
Because they would record in 1982.
Yes.
In their brother's basement. And it would sound shitty. It would sound terrible. And then in 1996 or whatever, they come out with a better one. But now the older one is a collectible.
Right.
Selling for $6,000 on eBay. And I don't think the band ever made $6,000 collectively.
Right.
So you're like,
yeah.
What?
Another good one is, and this always makes me mad when this happens, but a lot of times in movies, they'll use the remastered and or re-recorded version of a song. And Guardians of the Galaxy 2 did that with Brandy, because the version of Brandy that's in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is the album version. The single, which is what radio stations got, it's what played on the radio when I was a kid, so it's the version I heard.
Yeah.
That was basically a stripped down version of the song. It's got this very cool clavichord or some sort of electric piano that sounds really cool, and it's really simple, and it's got the horns, but it's subtler. And then you listen to the album version and it's just sanitized, overproduced, really well. It's not bad. It's neither of the versions of the song are bad. It's just a preference of one over the other because I grew up with one of the recordings. Yeah. So I get to the theater and I'm watching Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and that song comes on, and I love that song, and then I'm listening to it, and I'm like, there's something about it sounds wrong. And it took me years to figure out that, the way that bands used to work is we'll get in the studio, like you said, tin can in my brother's basement. Whatever we can do to make a song, we make the song. That's almost a demo, but it's considered professional enough that the record companies put that out as a single, that'll fund the album. Yeah. They put it out as a single. If it gets enough radio play and people keep on requesting it, that generates revenue to the record company. And once you have the revenue to do it, you can basically justify putting up the money for an album because you know that enough people have requested the song, they'll buy the album. And then you go into the studio with professionals, and you have professional band, and you have a whole setup, separate tracks, anything you need. Yeah. And by that point, they were doing 16-track recordings in the studio. So it comes out sounding really clean. And the guy's voice is pretty much the same, and you listen to it, and it's good, but there's just something about it that it scratches the wrong part of your brain. Yeah.
Too digital.
No, not even that. It's just that when you listen to one song 50,000 times, and then you listen to a cover version of it, And sometimes you'll have a situation like My Chemical Romance has that song Cancer. And then 21 Pilots, who I don't even like, do a cover of Cancer for this like rock magazine 10th anniversary of the Black Parade. And it's incredible. It's like better than the original version of Cancer. Yeah. So there are mixed cases all over the place of bands doing that. There's also obviously bands who start out, you listen to a version of the song and you're like, that's terrible. And then you listen to a remake of it and you're like, oh my God. Jerry Reed. Jerry Reed does that with Alabama Wild Man.
Wild Man.
There's two versions of that song. I think they're both amazing.
Yeah.
The first one is much more country produced. It's a lot of twangy guitar and acoustic guitars being used in a way that makes them like the star of the show. And then the second version is like a 1970s overproduced mess and still great. It starts out with the horns. Because the first one's like, and then the second version is like, it just starts out with these really heavy horns instead of the guitar. It's like, and then it gets back to him singing the same verse, same words, with more energy behind it, and they're both great songs.
And he's doing the Jerry Reed like, huh, cook it, cook it,
yeah.
You know, fucking love Jerry Reed. Shout out Jerry Reed.
Yeah, shout out Jerry Reed.
You've been dead for quite some time.
My uncle once said to me, Jerry Reed, that guy lived a hard life. I don't know who he was thinking of. Because I looked into Jerry Reed, and it seemed like he was married to the same woman his entire career.
Yeah, just a good guy.
Slept around and stuff like that, but like who didn't in show business?
Yeah.
And raised a good family. Did a lot of good stuff. His last 10 years of being alive, he was in a bunch of movies. He was in The Waterboy. He's the bad guy in The Waterboy.
He's in Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit 2. He did the soundtracks. Eastbound and Down. And also Westbound and Down on the same soundtrack. But everybody forgets about that. Because in Smokey and the Bandit, what's it about?
He's got to get that truck across the...
Truck of what?
I don't remember.
Beer. It was Coors.
Coors.
That was real. There were places where they couldn't get Coors over state lines, so they would send bootleggers basically to go through and bring the beer, and that was a true story.
You can tell.
Not Smoking the Bandit, but
you can tell the Coors is truly cold when the mountain turns blue as the Rockies. You're like, what? Thanks, Sam Elliott.
Yeah.
What?
I've never liked Coors though. I don't know.
Yeah, it tastes like piss.
Yeah.
Not that I know what piss tastes like.
Yeah, he does. And if anybody
but
does,
I'll never tell.
No, he's told me he does. He knows what it tastes like.
I do.
So, anyways, yeah, I just ruined a little moment for him that he thought he was getting a moment. It's my moment.
You rained on my Black Parade.
My moment. I'm the editor.
You are the editor.
But there's all these interesting things in music where they've done this. There are also like cover versions of artists who. It basically like resurrects the artist. Crossover like Run DMC and Aerosmith. Yeah. Aerosmith was like dying.
Yeah.
The guy was constantly on drugs. Steve. Oh no, not Steve.
Steven Tyler.
Steven Tyler. And so like they were in the back of the limo at one point in the 80s, and they're driving along, and song comes on. You See Me Crying, which is an Aerosmith song, and Steven Tyler's like, "Wow, man, we should do a cover of that song." And Joe Perry turned to him and was like, "It's our fucking song. Like, what are you talking about?" Like, they were that fucked up at that point. And then Run DMC comes along and does Walk This Way.
Yeah.
And they, turn them into a sensation again. Suddenly, Aerosmith is cool.
Yeah.
Brings them right back.
And then they had multiple hits after that.
Oh, yeah.
In, like, the 2000s.
There's also,
90s.
in the 70s, there's a lot of... like artists who wrote songs for disco acts.
Yeah.
And so you'll hear like Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes do like Don't Leave Me This Way. And it's this great soul tune, whatever. And then all you have to do is put a little more emphasis on the drums, and it's a disco song, and then it's Thelma Houston. And that's a great song too. But it's just like, it's interesting to see the trajectory of music and where it goes and how it comes back around and stuff. That's what fascinates me about it. It's like a giant web.
This is a weird comment, but it is in music, so we'll keep on that road. But
yeah, sure.
I appreciate artists and bands that sing in their native accent way more than I do anybody else.
I think that is something that is rare because, like, you'll get a band like Phoenix.
Yeah.
They're from France.
Yeah.
They don't sing in a French accent, but they're great.
Well, like the Proclaimers.
Yes.
They sing in a Scottish accent,
Right.
and it's great. So does
Dubliners.
Arctic Monkeys.
Arctic
Dubliners, they sing
the
that.
Beatles.
But, like, why does Adele sound like, when she's singing, like a southern woman from, like Louisiana? And you talk to her, she's like, "Hello, mate. Look, how you doing?" Like, Iggy Azalea is a big one. Like, she raps way differently than she fucking talks.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, no. Shrimp on the barbie."
I've never had a problem with Iggy Azalea. I don't know.
I don't have a problem with her, but, like, I appreciate it more.
One last problem.
Yeah, Charlie XCX. I have more respect for people who sing in their terrible, shitty accents.
Oh, I could do some amendments on some of the things I said that I found out from my mom were different than I thought.
Go ahead, because I could too. Like,
Yeah,
apparently, we're wrong.
Apparently, our audiences are moms.
All two of them.
Both of them. And my mom came back to me while she was listening to the podcast, stopped the podcast, and texted me and said, I was listening to the podcast, and I don't remember leaving you alone at the house like that. And I had to explain to her, like, that one totally happened. When I had E. coli, I was at home at my house, and the guy who was there was one of my dad's employees. And my dad and his wife at the time, my stepmom, they were in St. Martin doing an event. So while I was there, I stayed at the house and stuff like that. But my mom tried to take me to Grandma's house because I was really sick. This is like 7th grade. And everybody at Grandma's house was like, "Get him the fuck out of here. He's going to kill her." Yeah. Because it's E. coli. It's really contagious. And the doctors apparently didn't know that or didn't tell my mom that. So they brought me back, and I stayed at the house with my brother, or maybe both brothers, and that guy. And, nothing bad happened or anything. It was just, I survived. So the thrush was terrible. But so that was the first one. The second one was when I got swine flu. Swine flu, apparently, I was at my grandfather's house for the week because he lived in town. I was staying with him so that I could still go to school and not disturb my mom. And, like, oh, you have to drive down to North Kingstown every morning to bring him to school now and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, I basically was at the school building, and my aunt showed up and my mom showed up. My aunt also lived in town, and my mom was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's my Aunt Kate. Don't worry about it, Katie. I'll bring him back to the house. It'll be fine." And when we left, she kind of turned to me and was like, "We're bringing you back to your house because, like, I can't bring you back to Grandma's. You're too sick." Which was understandable, but then I got there and there's nobody there, and no food, and before they left for their trip, like, they had eaten all the good stuff in the fridge and everything, and there wasn't any soup because it was like the beginning of the school year. We didn't have that stuff at the time, so I just, like, collapsed in my bed, and then my stepmom's friend had to come over and, like, bring me a care package of soup and Gatorade and stuff, and that was like it. Like, my mom just like, "All right, well, see ya," and, like, left me on like, in this bed. Yeah. And it was like, all right, I still had bunk beds at that point. That's how long ago it was.
Just, like, fucking shivering.
Yeah. Junior in high school and all this. And then the scarlet fever. So I talked about how when I got E. coli, they pricked my arm like 10 times, and then they were like, "We could do a finger prick." It's like, "Oh yeah? Oh good." They did that to me when I was a little baby in the hospital for scarlet fever. You did it again?
I did it again.
So last podcast, he took this pepper, and you can't even see those on the video. These are pepper seeds. He took that pepper and he
I was twisting the seeds out, like,
and then he, like, put it in his eye. And so we dealt with this last time.
I scratched my eye like 20 minutes after I was done, and I forgot.
Right. So now he's done it again, but this time with the right eye.
I wasn't doing it with that hand.
And this is a week later.
I wasn't doing it with that hand. Ugh.
I just don't know what to do with you. You're just derailing the podcast. You took off the sunglasses I thought we was doing.
Watch.
We're supposed to be different guys.
We are different. I'm so different right now. It's the right eye.
Yeah, hide that so that they don't have to see you. Yeah. Jesus.
We're good. We're all good now.
The thing with the vein, apparently happened to me when I had scarlet fever, but I was 3. And they just kept stabbing my arm, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And then I guess my mom just said to them, like, look, I was already over it, or I was treated already. They were just trying to get a sample because, like, for medical research. And my mom said, look, you've already tested him. We got the medication. We're going. And they just took me and left, and they were just, both of them, livid. Because it's like, what the fuck are they doing to him? Like, they just kept on stabbing me. I was like 3. So, I also found out apparently my aunt had scarlet fever when she was very young. But it's one of those things that, like, you don't get. Like, people don't get that. So, I don't know. I like this format more because we can do stuff like this and cut in and be like, hey.
Yeah.
Here's something from an episode that we did that, like, was, either incorrect or... what was the name of the... Kevin Robinson?
Kevin Robinson.
Was the name of the BMX biker. He was from East Providence. Most likely it was him. And he was a really cool guy. He passed away in I think, 2017, which is a real shame.
Yes.
He set a bunch of records. He was a big guy in the BMX world. So I'm sad that I didn't know who he was at the time or that I didn't know later. But really cool of him to take time out of his day and then come down and be like, I stopped at Allie's Donuts. And everybody's just like, yeah!
Yeah.
The greatest person we've ever met. It's the closest to Tony Hawk we ever got. I talked about the Gravity games.
You did.
Okay. So, yeah.
So my mom was like, I don't remember being. My mom is Irish. I don't remember the crows in the school, Ricky. I'm like, you weren't there, right? Right? You weren't in the school with me. You just sent me to this fucking ornitharium where I could learn some math. That was pretty much the only thing. Like, I don't remember the crows.
I'm pretty sure we already also talked about the Autobahn Society where I almost died.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
My mom just, like, putting me on the table in the nature's classroom, just like, look, they were our ride, man. We gotta wait.
Yeah,
just
call an Uber.
Yeah,
that hasn't been invented yet, Bennie.
What wasn't invented?
Invented.
And we were over the Newport Bridge. There were all these things when I was a kid that were pitched to me as like, it's too much money. We can't do that. Going over the bridge to Newport. We talked about this because you were like, oh, it's $8 to get over. It's like $1.
I thought it was like $4 going over, $4 coming back.
If you pay cash.
Well, yeah.
But if you have an Easy Pass and you do all this stuff.
But if you don't have the Easy Pass.
Like by now, if you don't have an Easy Pass, you're an idiot.
Hot takes.
Hot takes. Because everybody in every state in New England uses Easy Pass, so you can go. I can go from here to Jersey, get off in Jersey, and my tolls will all be through Easy Pass.
Well, there was a while there when I was living out in the middle of the country, and I'd come back here to visit family, and then like, you're just fucked for $8 if you go over the bridge.
Right.
So like, that's what I was referring to.
That's fair. But so like going over the bridge was one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too expensive. We can't go there. We got to pay the toll to get over the bridge. Don't want to do that. And at the time, there were coins. You'd buy for $10.
Like
you'd
token.
buy a sleeve of them. I still have one.
Yeah.
And then like parking at the mall and stuff. My mom would park on that street across the street from where they do water fire. Right across the street from the mall is a street that goes straight down, kind of winds. There's a Water Place restaurant and stuff over there.
Goes up to the Capitol.
No. The other straight across from when you're in the food court looking out at the river.
Providence
like that
Place
way.
Mall.
Yeah, Providence Place Mall. Okay. And so we would go over there. We'd park on the street, and then we'd walk into the mall. And all those years, I'm like, oh, we're saving so much money.
Yeah.
And then I'm an adult. They did change the policy at the mall. It used to be $2 for the first 6 hours, and now it's like the first 3 hours is $0, and then after that's $2, and then after that's $5, $10. It goes up incrementally. Well, I became an adult and was like, oh, I want to go to the mall, but it's so expensive. And then I went there, and even then, like the prices for parking were nothing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, it's because my mom smoked. Like that was her cigarette money.
It's like those things.
Like, all right.
It's like those things they tell you when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you turn on the light in the car while you're driving.
Oh, that's illegal.
You're gonna crash.
Yeah. That's what you were told?
Yeah.
Oh, I was told straight up it's illegal. They'll pull you over.
Yeah. Like,
which then like the only time that light was ever used was if the passenger in the car was looking at a book or a map.
Yeah.
That was it. And like, I wouldn't be comfortable driving around with the lights on in the car anyways because they reflect off the windows.
No, I don't turn them on.
No,
like,
you don't. But
like,
as a kid,
anyway,
like
you know?
the reasoning for it's never actually why.
Yeah, they just tell you a lie, and then they're like, all right,
It's easier and quicker to tell a kid a lie that's going to like scar them a little bit.
If you crack your knuckles, you're going to get arthritis. Well, you're going to get arthritis because you broke both your fucking arms like a fool. But, you know. Ugh.
Gotta get the pinky. That's getting cut.
It should be.
Can I get a good one? Can I get a good one? Like I said, I'm just a reminder that inside of all of us is a skeleton.
Yes. And you say that with a smile like you're proud of it, and that's concerning to me.
Well, we should all know. We're all just a bunch of bones. What do you think is clanging against the table? The meat on the hands? No, it's the bones. It's the bones, Ricky.
This is Don't Start Me Talking.
This is Don't Start Me Talking. We're starting again. No. Yeah, so those are corrections. I'm trying to think of anything else. Alan Sean Feinstein was exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Like I looked into it afterwards, and that's true.
Ryan Cabrera is exactly like I said too.
Yeah,
he was there. At some point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could talk about another series of assemblies that I'll try to condense down.
Before you do
bad
that,
assemblies.
Before you do that, because I'm going to forget. Can I talk about Kennedy Plaza real quick? Would you like that? Would that make you happy? The peppers have gone from my eyes.
Tell us about Kennedy Plaza. First of all, tell us your relationship to Kennedy Plaza, and then tell us the stories that you got.
All right. So,
because let me tell you, folks, he went through some shit.
I've got stories. Right?
Yeah. All right. So let me start it off just to give you a little bit of context as quickly as possible. Rick worked in North Kingstown at the job lot that is over by the Ace Hardware in town. To get there, Rick lived in Providence at the time. He'd have to take the bus. So he'd take the bus from Providence down to North Kingstown. To catch that bus to 66, right?
The 14.
Oh, the 14. So you went the other way. You went down Post Road.
Yep.
Oh, all right. Well, that makes more sense. To get to the 14, you got to go to Kennedy Plaza, right outside the mayor's office in Providence. If you've ever seen the skyline of Providence, all those buildings are in Kennedy Plaza. Like that big Superman building that's not the Superman building.
Yeah.
All that stuff. And the mayor's office is right there. And like 2 weeks ago, Mayor Smiley, or as I call him, Mayor Frowny.
Hot takes.
Mayor Smiley had them crack down on a bunch of drug dealers and stuff that were hanging around there and preying on people.
They were.
And cleaned it up considerably in the last couple of weeks, apparently. However, you can't wash all the stink out.
Can't wash all the stink.
That's the context of what he's about to tell you. He went there every day. He was a regular commuter.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah.
Took the bus, you know. And so I'm in Kennedy Plaza, and this was in 2020. So, like, everything's gone to shit. There was basically no policing up there. So, like, everything was just, it was a free-for-all in Kennedy Plaza, which already, like, even before 2020, didn't have the best reputation for being, like, a great place to be, right? You don't want to go there at night. You'd hear that a lot with people, like, around the city or in the state. Like, oh, I wouldn't go there at night. I wouldn't go there at night, you know? Like, it's not a great place to be. So the first thing I saw when I was in Kennedy Plaza in 2020 is, unfortunately, there's a lot of syringes in the grass because Kennedy Plaza is a big bus hub, like a big circle, and the buses park at different stops, and you go on about your way. But in the middle there's a park with children, which you want syringes to be a part of, right? So there would be a bunch of syringes in the grass. And I saw this happen one day while I was going to work at like 7 a.m. They would bring the big lawnmower, like the sit-down riding lawnmower, and just like, you know, mow the grass, which you should, right? Mow the grass for the park. The kids can play. But they just ran over the syringes. So they're just spraying metal bits of syringes and like medical waste all over the fucking park. And I saw that happen multiple times. So I was like, all right, man, I'm not going to fucking, walk through there with sandals on, I guess. Kids were. And then, let's see. What's the other one? Oh, yes. One day, this was like in around winter of 2020. I'm still taking the bus down, still working that retail job. And behind bus stop Z, which is where I would catch the 14 every day, is a big statue. It's multi-tiered. You can sit on it, read a book, do whatever you're going to do. This person wasn't reading a book.
What were they doing?
What were they doing? Oh, so it was two people. And they were sitting there, as you do, reading a book. Not really. And I turn around. I'm just like standing there at the bus stop. It's pretty cold in the morning. I got my Dunkin', and I'm like, looking around, and I do this. I pull one of these. And behind me is a little person sitting there. And I go, oh, hey, like, that's something. Like, hey. But next to him is a lady. And so, like, I'm like, oh, I'm still looking around. It didn't really, like, catch me at first. But then I look over again, and I'm like, because this little person's sitting there, and he's shooting heroin intravenously.
Mm-hmm.
It's either that or he's like a diabetic. I don't know.
Sure.
But that's not the weirdest part about this. He was getting a fellation.
Yeah, at the same time.
A fellatio at the same time from this woman as he's shooting up. And it's like 7:15 in the morning. It's 28 degrees with wind chill, And I had to sit there and like, it's like a car crash. You can't look away, but you don't want to look, you know? And like, I sitting there like, that's one thing that probably has never happened before. Ever, right? That's one thing that's like, unique to my experience. That like nobody else saw. Nobody was at the bus stop.
Yeah.
There was like people milling about, but I don't think they saw.
Right.
I saw it for some reason, and now you know it.
Which is the great thing about, being in a place like Kennedy Plaza is you get to see things literally you never see.
Oh, I saw fights.
Yeah.
I saw arguments every day. Like it's right outside of City Hall too.
Also,
the mayor's office.
I just want to say sorry for adjusting the camera. I was just testing something out, and the thing that I wanted to test out didn't work the way that I thought it would work.
Didn't work.
Good thing I tested it so that in a real situation wouldn't be a problem. But there's a part where they're just looking at your guard sucks.
Oh, good.
Shirt. So
good. It does.
But yeah, Kennedy Plaza.
Kennedy Plaza. Yeah. So it's
that's a wonderful. I forgot about that one. That's a wonderful tale of yours. Because where the fuck?
What?
First of all, what? Like it's not like a closed area. It's like a public open forum.
Open. It's open.
It looks
right
like
outside the mayor's office. Like literally, you could
at
throw
the
a rock.
end. Yeah, at the end of Kennedy Plaza is the mayor's office on one side, and on the other side, it's what?
Like office buildings and stuff like that.
Like Brown and shit is very close by.
Brown University is really close by. Providence is a small city.
Yeah. Oh, tiny.
Everything is walkable. But yeah, that's the highlight of my time there, and seeing that raised some questions. Number one, why?
Yeah.
It's 28 degrees outside.
How do we live that guy's life? That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know that because part of me was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And part of me was like, man, you get it, like.
I guess I don't know. I'm not a heroin guy, but
neither am I.
I don't know.
I was just like, I guess if you're doing heroin, might as well get a fellation.
Might as well.
Might as well get a fellation on the statue. I think it's like Roger Williams or something.
It's got to be somebody famous. It might not be Roger Williams, but it probably is.
But also, as I said before, there are children present. So like, what?
Yeah, like what are you doing?
What are we? And again, there was no policing around that time.
Right.
So like, there's open drug use and there's like open sex acts like that all the time and fights and everything. There was like, I saw a cop go by once and he was kind of doing that thing like, I'm not looking.
Yeah.
I'm not look like. There was people sleeping on the steps of the mayor's office.
Yeah, they put a stop to that.
Yeah. But like, help them.
Yeah.
Right? Help them?
Like, what better political statement is there than literally homeless people sleeping on the steps and the mayor being like, yeah, get them out of here. They're really
get 'em
cheapening
outta
up
here.
the
Get 'em outta
property
here.
value down here in downtown Providence.
Get some fat Irish cop like, all right, folks, move along. Move along.
Then
Nothing to see
we've gotten,
here.
2 false alarms in the last month of like, oh, active shooter in Providence, and neither of them were real.
Yeah, there's a lot of stabbings, though.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I was living off of Westminster Street there.
Yeah.
When a drive-by happened and they shot into my house. I was on the second floor. They shot into the first floor and then crashed their car at the end of the street.
Into that fence?
Into the metal fence.
The metal fence, yeah.
Yeah. And then
what street were you on?
What was that? Bridgham. Bridgham Street.
Bridgham.
It's like a little cross section off of Westminster. I was right next to Ogie's Trailer Park.
Reyes Liquors on the corner.
Shout out Ogie's. Shout out Reyes Liquors.
Reyes, I thought that they were awesome when I went in there.
Yeah, they're great.
They also had you could go in there and get just a Snapple, or you could get a root beer, and,
awesome
good stuff.
Awesome little bodega there.
Yeah, reasonably priced too for the middle of the city.
Yeah, dude. Like it was...
compared to Broadway liquor, which it didn't make any sense. It's like you're one street away. You're going to charge $20 for something they charge $5.
Providence is that's what I mean. It's so small, but there are those areas of where they gentrified the fuck out of the place.
Yes, yeah.
Because when I told my family that I was moving to Providence, and they're like, "Where are you moving?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "Off of Westminster." They're like, "Oh no."
yeah.
Oh no, you can't go around. And there are places there's a park not too close to, not too far, pretty much between where you lived and where I lived.
Yeah, Dexter Training Ground, right? That whole Dexter Park. Yeah.
And at 11 o'clock, I would not go there.
Right.
At night because.
Well, right. So right after I moved from there, I used to live on Willow Street, which is right across the street from there. When I stopped living there, all of a sudden, there was a big homeless population over there because they opened up the Armory building, which is at the end of the training grounds. It's like a big castle in Providence. They opened that up to the homeless.
Yeah.
For the winter as because they were freezing to death.
Yeah.
So
it gets cold here.
Right.
And in Providence,
I moved out of that place in November.
Yeah.
And when I moved out of it, literally that day, there was a stabbing right on my street, right down the street from where I was. And then it was just week after week, I'd just hear more and more about another stabbing near the Armory and this and that. And I wasn't sure if it was this always happened and I just wasn't paying attention to it, or if the media kind of went after that area because they wanted the homeless to get out of there.
Yeah, that's probably why.
Well, yeah, that's what I kind of assumed was
bullshit.
happening.
They should freeze, not stab each other.
Yeah. I went to a vigil outside that building. That was for. It sucks that I don't even remember which club it was for, but there was a shooting at an LGBTQ club, and I went out to stand in vigil with all the people, and this is November or maybe October of last year. First really cold day of the year. The ground had frozen. It's really uncomfortable being there and standing around and stuff. And then they started talking, and it was the most unorganized vigil you've ever been to, where random people just were called up to talk, and none of them seemed to be on the same page about what they were talking about. So one of the first ones that came up was this, these two people, both of them seemed to be trans. I'm not sure. But one of them had a med kit on her back, and the other one had the microphone, and they're talking about we have to stand up and fight. We have to be ready to fight. Get your med kits, learn about emergency response, make sure that you know first aid in a crisis situation, because they will not protect us. They're not going to protect us, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But really militant, calling people to fight.
Yeah.
At a vigil. We're holding candles in a cold field.
Which, I can see the point. You should know how to, handle...
For sure. But nothing like that was happening around here at the time for them to be there's these fucking pigs. And it was just super aggro. And they came out and everybody was really quiet and just what the fuck? Then this other guy came out and he's talking about how I'm an ally. My daughter is trans. I been working with the LGBTQ community for 30, 40 years or something like that. And our doors are always open to anybody who needs help, that sort of thing. This other guy comes out, and he's talking about how one of his best friends, because he's the elder gay of the group. He's a 70-year-old gay guy.
Yeah.
Came, right up to the front, and he's like, listen, I don't tell this story very often. And he just told us this story about his friend who was brutally murdered in Providence and then hung up like a scarecrow on the fence outside of the armory. And when they found the body, the police were like, well, it's a suicide.
Yeah.
Ruled that a suicide.
That's a big thing. Actually, that happened. Let's go into true crime real quick. That happened a lot with like the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
Yeah.
The cops were called to his place multiple times, but then the cops would be like, "Ew, gay," and then like leave, and like they left. They gave one of the victims back to Jeffrey Dahmer, who had like a drill in his head. He had poured bleach into the hole and stuff like that already. So he's like mumbling around, and Jeffrey Dahmer comes out and is like, "Well, we're gay, and he's drunk, and we fought," and the cops were like, "Doesn't explain the blood, but okay, go on back." Gross.
I have never looked into Jeffrey Dahmer.
Good.
I know nothing about him. I know absolutely nothing. They put out that series last year, and I was like, fuck this. I'm not, I know enough about Ted Bundy. I know enough about a few of the big killers.
John Wayne Gacy.
A little bit about John Wayne Gacy. He hid kids under the house.
He
killed.
Yeah.
He was a clown.
The clown, yes.
Yeah, John Wayne Gacy, I remember. So there's like a few here or there, but like Jeffrey Dahmer, I just heard like, oh, that dude was a monster, and I'm like, good enough. I don't need to tear into the fucking life story of people like that.
Because like, this is all fairly recent too.
Yeah.
This happened like 28 years ago now.
Yeah.
Like 94, right? So like 29 years ago. Like it's all fairly recent, and they're
I mean, I've been on a real true crime kick. And I watched The Jinx.
Yes.
About the life and death of Robert Durst. I watched a movie called There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. And I watched I'll See You in the Dark, I think it's called. Did you get the title when you looked her up?
I did not.
Michelle McNamara, who is Patton Oswalt's first wife. And I watched these shows and a couple others, but I don't remember exactly which ones I watched. Maybe they'll pop back into my head. But the most exploitative one that I saw was definitely There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane.
Yeah.
That movie is, as somebody who has gone through having a family in like member in a bad legal battle, that movie made me so anxious and mad. If you've never heard this story, this woman was a mother. She was a pretty nice lady. Everybody knew her and liked her. And then they were on a camping trip it was her husband, her nieces, and her son, and her daughter. And all of the kids climbed into her car to go home from the campground to wherever they lived in New York. And then all of a sudden, nobody could find them. And there were a few calls made to the family, and then that was it. Basically, this woman drove into oncoming traffic and just completely obliterated this other car, knocked another car off the road. So 3-car accident, killed 8 people, including herself. She died. All the kids in the car except for her son died. And then these other 3 guys, a father and I think his 2 sons, they all died in the other crash. The way that this documentary is done and the way that it's unfolded is they're following the family, and the documentarians are like, 6 months after this happened, they started recording.
Yeah.
And the kid is still, he's got a brain injury and he wears glasses now, which he didn't have to before. And he got real messed up from the accident. Nothing but sympathy for that kid.
Of course. Yeah.
The father, devastated. Had no idea, didn't see this coming. Apparently they had a really good trip. Nobody fought. It wasn't like a big fight or anything like that. All that the kid was able to tell them was, Mommy had a headache. Mommy couldn't see. And then the accident happened. She had some sort of medical emergency, they think, and died. But her toxicology came back that she was like fucked up on alcohol. So
0.19 or
it was like 0.10 and the 0.1. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it was like 0.19 or something.
Yeah.
And the legal limit's like 0.08.
Yeah.
So she was fucked up. There was a bottle of vodka that smashed in the front of the car that they found. So the assumption is that she had been drinking.
Yeah.
She somehow got that bottle into her car from the RV because it was usually stowed in the RV for just like, nighttime when you're out on a camping trip, whatever. And the husband drove the RV back and she drove the truck or the van with all the kids. Well, the toxicology, was done by the state. They immediately ruled it as, it's a DUI and death resulting and all this stuff. But she was dead by that point, so you don't get
her side of it, yeah.
Right. All they have is video footage of her from earlier in the day and a few 911 calls from people who either followed her, were almost hit by her, or, saw her driving around.
Yeah, motorists.
And there was something wrong. Nobody could figure out what it was. There was a point where they got out of the car, all the kids on the side of the road, and I don't know if she got sick or what, but she left her phone there and got back in the car, and they kept going, and then the crash happened. This documentary follows the family, her family, and talks to some of the other victims because there was another whole family involved. And from the point of view of the family, they're like, we need to get this ruled out. We need to figure out what the deal is with the testing, this and that. They hired this lawyer who hired an investigator. The investigator ghosted them. Apparently they ran out of money to pay him, and he just held on to the results. Tried to call them to give them the results under the guise of like, oh, I have results for you, when he was really trying to get money from them. So they ignored him. And then they found out later that like, because they ignored him, he like just, tuned out and was like, fuck him, don't care.
Yeah.
But what he found out was that from an outside investigator who tested the DNA sample, the alcohol level was accurate. So they got like double confirmation in the documentary that she definitely was drunk. Yeah. Like whatever she was trying to treat, if she had a migraine or something crazy that she's trying to drink away, that doesn't justify it.
No,
you know what I mean?
You shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car even if you have a migraine.
Right. But this family member of theirs, and it's the sister-in-law to... just jumped up and fell. It was very funny. It's the sister-in-law to the father.
Yeah.
Not even his sister. His brother's wife gets super involved in their family, starts like raising the kid, comes over every day, and then starts telling the husband like, you don't appreciate everything that I do for you, and you got it so easy and this and that. And the guy is working night shifts every fucking night. So she's going into, I'm the only one who cares for this boy, and he needs to know his mommy wasn't a killer. And it's like, okay, that might be the case, and you can tell him that, and you can make sure that he knows his mom's not a killer.
Yeah.
But she made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
And it resulted in 8 people's deaths, including hers. So she didn't get off scot-free.
No.
And it wasn't a suicide thing as far as they know.
No.
It was just an irresponsible series of decisions that led to a lot of people dying.
Yeah.
And that is not fair to any of them.
No.
But this woman is like on the fucking dad. And like, we got to keep pursuing. We got to keep doing this and that. Drags him onto Larry King Live with the lawyer. And Larry King's going, how do you explain the bottle of vodka? And they're like, well, that's the part we can't explain. And like all this shit and like speaking for him. If you watch all the interviews with them where it's her and him, like the dad and his sister-in-law, she's like the worst presence to have around that because she's obsessed. And now she's also ingrained in their lives and stuff. It was the worst, most exploitative documentary I've ever seen.
So that's the sad thing about a lot of true crime. There's like a couple podcasts I listen to. One of my favorites is True Crime Garage. Shout out True Crime Garage. They're more of like bringing attention to like cold cases and things that like,
wouldn't get the
new
attention
details
otherwise.
And stuff like they've actually helped like with their not their network, their fan base.
Right.
Like people calling tips.
And I would say that if they're doing cold cases, if they're doing stuff that isn't settled yet, I am all for them tearing that case open and giving it a wider spotlight.
But for like Netflix to do like Jeffrey Dahmer again, dude, like we all know what happened. It's closed.
I don't.
The case is closed. You don't, but like
yeah. But if you wanted to know about it,
everybody know it's out there.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what happened.
Right.
We've caught the guy. He's done.
Yeah.
Got killed with like a broomstick in the shower or something like that.
Sure.
Like we know what it is. You're just doing it to like, make money.
Right.
And the people who like whose family members died are still alive and they're young.
Yeah.
They're young, too. They were
I know.
They were like 20 in 1994.
They did a recreation of a part in court where one of the victims' family members screamed at Jeffrey Dahmer, and they like did a recreation of that. And it's like, dude, you're just like for the not the documentary, for the biopic.
Yeah.
With what's his face, Boner.
Oh,
Boner
that is
from
Evan
Agatha.
Peters.
Evan Peters, Ralph Boner.
Saw him in New York once.
Which, yeah. Anyways,
yeah, it's just I don't like that part of true crime that is exploitative like that, because like you can tell right away like why people are doing this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And it's usually just like a paycheck. Somebody's paying them in their end. I watched Paradise Lost. Actually, before I get into Paradise Lost, just really quickly, I love The Jinx, and we've talked about The Jinx a lot.
The Jinx is great,
but like now that I've found out that the ending was kind of manipulated, it does cast a lot of doubt on it, because why not just play in order exactly what he said?
Yeah,
it's not as damning. That's why. Because if you go onto Wikipedia, you can look this up. If you've ever seen the end of The Jinx, spoiler alert for The Jinx, which is an amazing documentary, you should absolutely watch it. It's 6 episodes. It's great. Robert Durst was a wealthy kid who was from a family that owned like the World Trade Center at one point. They owned big buildings in Manhattan, the Durst organization, Durst Corporation, one of those.
Yeah.
His father was a guy who built a huge empire of money. His brother, who was younger than him, ended up taking over that empire. So Robert Durst, even though he was not interested in doing any of that stuff, felt like really slighted. And he was also just a fucking crazy person. So he allegedly, but we're pretty sure, killed his first wife, hid the body. They've never found her body.
And he definitely
Kathleen
killed his neighbor.
Killed his neighbor Morris Black, but hid the head, so they couldn't prove that it wasn't self-defense, because the gunshot that killed him was from his head.
Yeah.
So they couldn't prove that it wasn't self-defense, which is what Dick DeGuerin, the greatest lawyer of all time, argued in court, and got him off on it. Then he got caught in this web with the filmmakers for The Jinx, where they found this letter that he had written to Susan Berman, another victim of murder, and the letter matches a letter that was sent to the police telling them cadaver at her house.
Beverly Hills, and he wrote Beverly wrong.
Right. And the funny thing about all that, he didn't even need to write them the letter for them to find her, because somebody reported that her door was open on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And that's what sent people over to find her that day.
Yeah.
So he sent this letter that came by snail mail 3 days later or whatever, and it completely implicated him. And it didn't happen until 20 years later, but it totally did.
A lot of times, that's what happens, is they just fuck up. They do something stupid and they fuck up. Like BTK.
Yeah.
Bind, Torture, Kill. He's in Topeka, Kansas for like... He started in the 70s, went on like a 10-year hiatus of not killing and torturing people, and then like came back in the late 90s, and they caught him in like 2005. Right. But the way they caught him is not police work. He just fucked up.
Yeah.
So it's really stupid, actually. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, was working at a church, and he had the floppy disk from the computer in the church with all his details on it, like when you put in the computer, login, all that. And he sent a letter to the police, and he was like, "Can you trace me through a floppy disk?" And the police were like, "No." And he sent them a floppy disk, and that's how they fucking caught him. Yeah. Like, stupid shit like that all the time. They're stupid people. They try to make these people out to be like, you know,
they're masterminds. It's just that the police have not turned over the right leaf is the only thing. And then once they do, they're like, "You fucking kidding me?" Like almost every time. But so that The Jinx is a good documentary. The ending is a little bit iffy, but the end of it is that they catch him in that lie on camera, hot mic, and he has a very bad reaction to it. And that alone to me is pretty damning. But like forensic evidence and everything else, they could have figured out that it was his letter. They could have figured out it was his writing, all this stuff, because they had all that. He died in prison of COVID. Yes. But he got arrested on a gun charge in Louisiana. New Orleans.
New Orleans.
He was passing through New Orleans with a gun, and they caught him. And then they dragged him back to prison so that they could put him on trial for Susan Berman's death. Anyways, that's a really good documentary because of how in-depth it goes and how well it highlights this case that wasn't solved at the time. and that the end of the documentary itself became a part of the case. And that's fantastic. Then you get into I'll See You in the Dark, that Michelle McNamara one about the Golden State Killer, who was also the East Area Rapist, a bunch of other names.
The most prolific.
They found that guy because one of his relatives did a DNA test.
Yeah.
And they matched it to the family, and they figured out through the database that, like, oh, this is somebody in the family. And then they camped out at his house, and they went through his garbage, and they got a matching DNA sample that matched everything.
They got, like, a skull out of his flower pot or something like that.
And then a year later, after they got him, they did a follow-up episode that I never saw before. I just found it this year. And he's in court, and he admits to all of it.
Yeah.
Which fucked up that he did any of it, but at the very end, at the very least, gave the families the closure of saying, I'm the one who did it. I deserve whatever I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And he's still in prison. He faked, I'm walking with a cane and everything. And he got up onto his bed, climbed up onto the table, and he's putting things up to hide all the light because he doesn't like light. He'd hide the TVs in the houses and stuff. But they nailed him. He was a former cop and all this stuff. That's another example of, like, that documentary, I think, was necessary. It was happening concurrently, her investigation was happening. And then she passed away in 2016, which was horrible. Patton Oswalt, her husband, got together a bunch of people to help finish, sent the stuff where it needed to go, and they got right up to the end of the investigation, and then the cops fucking caught him. And just, like, validated everything that she was trying to do.
After, like, 50 years, too.
Yeah.
This was this
was
like a Zodiac. This was like a Jack the Ripper. Like, we're never gonna find him. Like,
and one of the nieces of his that lived with him for a while said, as soon as I left, the killing spree started up again. And like, now that we know that it was because I was there, he wasn't doing any of that stuff. And then when I left, he just started right back up. That's necessary. Paradise Lost, the ultimate in documentary investigative journalism, because Paradise Lost is the story of the West Memphis Three, who were three kids from Arkansas who dressed in black. Two of them dressed in black, listened to metal. The other one, I didn't even know if he was their friend.
He was an acquaintance.
He was
Jesse Miss Kelly.
Miss Kelly, yeah.
Miss Kelly.
And Damien Eccles and
the other one.
Yeah, the other guy. Unfortunately, the other guy just got roped in.
Yeah.
And it's like not. Anyways, they were three kids who got a triple murder pinned on them, which was like one of the most brutal. If you are, like, you get sick easily, you can't look at disturbing images, don't watch Paradise Lost. It starts out with the video footage of the cops finding the bodies, and it's raw.
So this is
like the rawest of, like, here's the thing. I watched this documentary and I sat through the whole thing, and it's disgusting.
It is.
But it should be.
Yeah.
It should shock the shit out of you that they're allowed to show this, that they did show this, that any of this stuff is even in here, because it's a crime. These people were murdered. You should be horrified.
And also, the West Memphis Three, those three guys, Jesse Miss Kelly, Damien Eccles, and unfortunately the other guy, I don't remember his name, that was a miscarriage of justice. This is one time in numerous times when a satanic panic was going through
a town,
the U.S.
Yeah.
And they basically got, like, roped in and put into, like,
there were a bunch of perceived things that were Satanist happening in the town.
Yeah.
And Damien Eccles was a kid who, he was Catholic most of his life, and then he started talking to his pastor about, like, satanic shit. Yeah, got into Wicca, and then he and his friend really would hang out together and listen to, Iron Maiden and Metallica and stuff like that, and darker music. And so people just thought, like, oh, obviously if he's a suspect, he did it. And then they poisoned the well of the whole community.
Like, there was no way he's getting a free, like, a good. But they ended up roped in. They ended up getting convicted.
Alfred. Oh,
but then an Alfred plea. 18
years later.
18 years later.
Something crazy.
Something that pisses me off is the fact that an Alfred plea exists.
Yeah.
Because an Alfred plea basically is like, okay, we didn't do it. We're going to let you go.
Right.
But you're also saying that the state had enough evidence to convict, which they fucking didn't.
Yeah. Their argument was basically that, like, look, we can't pin this on anybody else, even though it's very likely it was one of the stepfathers, a guy named Terry Hobbs.
It was very likely that there was a guy in a chicken place outside of town who just showed up.
Did it.
No. He walked into the chicken place covered in blood and mud. These kids were found at the bottom of a estuary.
Yeah.
Tied up in shoelaces. It's very brutal. Don't watch it if you're shaking.
If you are not good with true crime stuff and you are not good with violent, like if you've seen images of things like the Holocaust or 9/11 or stuff like that, and you're like, oh, I can't, don't watch the documentary. Just look it up. It's a necessary case everybody needs to know about, but it's very hard to watch. But I feel like all true crime should be that way.
It should.
If you're watching true crime, you should basically, you should be so into this that looking at this stuff, you're sort of desensitized to it, but it should shock you back into like, oh my God. I watched all 3 episodes of Paradise Lost, and the first episode is them when they're kids, and it happens as it's happening, then they get put in jail.
Yeah.
The second episode is 10 years later or whatever, and they're still stuck there, but now they have the support of a lot of people in Hollywood who are like, come on, these guys, they didn't do anything. Circumstantially, they were all at school that day, like they couldn't have done it at the time that it was said to have been done. And then, there's like all this
stuff. They
stuff.
just got railroaded.
Yeah.
And this is
you think it's this chicken guy? They don't even talk about that in the documentary.
There was a chicken restaurant outside of the town, and they called it in. It's on the records.
Yeah.
They were like, hey, so we just had some guy walk into our bathroom. He was covered in mud and what looked like blood, and it's all over the bathroom. Do you guys want to do something about that? And they just didn't come out, or they didn't look into it, or the restaurant cleaned it before they came in. But they were going after these 3 guys just because they were satanic.
Yeah.
And they end up getting railroaded. And this is the important part of this documentary and this story is don't talk to the police. If you're ever brought into the room and they're like, hey, we got to talk. And people be like, well, if you have nothing to hide, you don't have to worry, right? No, you do. Because,
their job is to put somebody behind bars for the crime.
Yeah.
To appease the family and the state and say, hey, we got the guy. They're behind bars. We're satisfied. Yeah. This was a case where they grabbed a kid who knew Damien Eccles. Jesse Miskelly was not, a great friend of his. Jesse Miskelly is kind of special needs. He was operating at a 5th grade level.
He was 16. They brought him in there without his father.
Right.
And interrogated him for 8 hours.
And if you listen to the tape, it is one of the most clearly coerced confessions. All of the information that Jesse Miskelly provides is provided seconds earlier by a cop. None of it's original thoughts. He's just saying what they want him to say.
They'll be like, hey, Jesse, I know you said earlier that Damien didn't have a cross dagger, but he did have a cross dagger, right? And Jesse be like, yeah, I want to go home. Yeah. Oh, well, we'll let you go as soon as you know.
Yeah, as soon as you tell us what you need to know. And they railroaded this kid into a plea bargain that was like, well, you'll get life in prison, but they'll get death. And that's what we want. And
this happens. This isn't a one-off case. This happens all the time where innocent people who get proven out later get railroaded because
so then you have a case on the opposite side for me, making a murderer.
Yeah.
That dude did it. Stephen Avery, I'm convinced after watching everything that I've seen of it that he absolutely not only did it, but that he was a scumbag piece of shit. Roped his nephew into helping him and fucked that kid's entire life.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong about that. I would feel really bad if I ever met the dude and he got exonerated or whatever. But based on everything I saw, had a relationship with the person for Auto Trader before any of the murders happened. Violent history. His girlfriend, fiance in the first part of the documentary, in the second part, hates him, won't talk to him, and says I don't believe him anymore. I don't believe anything he says. So that's just sensationalism for the sake of sensationalism.
Yeah.
I hate that shit. I hate what's wrong with Aunt Diane for the same reason, because all it is, hey, let's open the wound for everyone to see.
Yeah, they're going to these family members who are broken people.
Yeah, it's completely.
It's 6 months later, and you have to understand the event of her doing that isn't where it ends.
Right.
Everyone, when they walk down the street, everyone knows that they're the family members.
Yes.
They don't know them personally, but they know them. You know what I mean?
By reputation.
Everything you hear, everything that you do, that's that guy. You know, like,
right?
Everyone who looks at
Forever.
Everyone who looks at you, oh, that's that guy. That's
Yeah.
like like. And it ruins your life. A lot of these people move away and don't comment on it, except if they're trying to like sell a book.
There's another stepdad in Paradise Lost who gets accused pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I forget his name. Real big guy.
Yeah.
And he goes out and he like burns a fake 3 graves and he's like, Damien Eccles and Jesse Miskelly and whatever other guy's name is, like, you will burn in hell and like all this stuff. And then he got accused because there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, he was just a creepy dude.
Yeah.
But he, they basically figured out that no, he couldn't have done it. And he ended up getting vilified by everybody. So they moved out of town and this and that. Then his wife died, which put even more scrutiny on him, even though she just like had a heart attack or possibly an overdose from a drug that he never found out what it was.
Speaking of, satanic panic, this happened recently. There was a documentary about a woman who stayed in the Cecil Hotel and got, somehow trapped in the water tower.
Dude, that one freaks me the fuck out. Yeah.
But, there was one guy staying at the hotel who was, like, into black metal and, like, witchy
so they
shit.
went right after him.
They went after him, even though he wasn't there at the time, and it's proven. But like these armchair like detectives, want to go after him, and they basically ruined his life.
Well, do you remember what happened when the Boston bombing happened with the Reddit thing?
Yep.
I was around for that, and even then I was like, just fucking guys, like stop. I think they got a guy killed because that Brown student, he either killed himself or he was thrown off the fucking bridge or whatever.
It ruins your life,
and for no reason. He didn't do anything. His name was Sunil Tripathi, I think.
Didn't do anything. Like it doesn't matter. Even because when the news reports it, they'll report the crime,
right?
But they won't report that like, oh, he's exonerated.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it's on like the 5th page.
Yeah, there's no correction on the nightly news to say, oh, we messed this one up. And
and even if they do correct it,
then
people
they're skeptics.
still won't believe it.
Yeah.
They still won't believe it, and your life is ruined.
Well,
for no reason.
I think the broader point that I just want to get back around to, because we're almost out of time, is just that there are 2 types of true crime documentaries in my view. There's the sensationalist, oh, we got to make money off this. There's Tiger King. What the fuck is Tiger King? And then there's the stuff like Paradise Lost that is necessary, and it's shining a light onto some of the darkest shit humanity has to offer for a reason. There's the Jinx, which was done because they wanted to nail this guy, because he had never faced justice for what he did.
No.
Killed 3 people, got away with all 3.
One's still missing.
Yeah, and not only that, there are other people who they've connected to him that they'll never get an answer on because he was never put up on trial for it. So, because he died.
So the main thing...
Those are necessary.
Yeah.
And they shine a light. They're real journalism. They need to exist.
Yeah.
The other stuff, something wrong with Aunt Diane, like, whoever made that movie, go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself.
You all you did
was
open a wound for a fucking child who went through one of the most traumatic things that a child could go through. He was laid on the grass, and his cousins and sister were piled on top of him. They thought he was dead. And then he started moving, and somebody was like, oh my God. You don't get over that. You just don't. Not through therapy, not through your aunt coming in and being like, I'm your mom now.
No.
Like, and fuck that bitch.
It stays
seriously.
With you. It stays
with
you.
There's a quote in that movie that is fantastic. It's from the daughter of the guy who was killed in the other crash, like in the other car. And she goes, I have forgiven Diane. I pray for her like I pray for all those girls, and I pray for, my brothers and my father. The family I'm working on.
Yeah.
Because, and that little boy. The family I'm working on. Because the family, I don't know what this is. Like, just admit that she was drunk, and we can all move on with our lives. Things happen. Bad things happen.
That's what a lot of people... survivors of stuff like that, the family of the perpetrator can't seem to get over a lot of the time is like, I knew this person, they were great to me, but they did this horrible thing.
Right. Which is true in situations we've seen in our personal like friend group of like, oh, here are pictures of the baby version of this person. They couldn't have done this terrible thing because look, they're just a baby. Yeah. And it's like, well, as a 26 whatever year old adult, they did this thing, and you can't just wish that away by being like, oh, I wish for the simpler time.
You can remember how they were to you, and still acknowledge the fact that what they did is fucked up and unforgivable.
Yes. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of mental and emotional fortitude to do that.
I think I like where this conversation went.
I did too. One more thing I want to say. I want to put this down again. No? No, go
ahead. I'm just kidding. We're way over time, but
don't talk to the police.
Don't talk to the police,
especially if you're innocent.
Let me take this. Here's the thing about the police. I am not one of those all cops are bastards guys. Not quite. I do believe that a lot of cops are crooked, and I do believe that there's a lot of shit going on in this country, especially to people who have darker skin than me, that sucks about the police. But the key thing with the police is that the police are always trying to find a solution so that they can move away from whatever case it is. If they pick you up because you're acting suspicious in their eyes and they think that you have been somehow related to this thing, it doesn't matter if you didn't do anything, if you weren't there, this or that. They will find some way to nail you for it. If it's your confession, like it was with Jesse Miskelly, if it's circumstantial evidence that puts you near the crime, if you're telling them things, and for whatever reason, you went through a long couple of days or whatever, you remember it wrong and you say it a certain way, that's on the record. That's it. You will spend the rest of your life trying to unexplain that. So what you do, I don't care if it's a public defender, I don't care if it's a lawyer from the the very top of the legal profession. You get yourself a lawyer and you shut the fuck up.
Use your Fifth Amendment and say you are using your Fifth Amendment.
Yes. You do not have to tell them anything. It is a cop's job to find the truth in a situation. And if they're trying to take the easy way out, pin it on you, even though you didn't do anything, it doesn't matter if you didn't do anything. They are going to try and pin it on you, and they're going to do it every time because that's what they're there to do. They are there to, honestly, you look at everything with cops, they are there to keep the streets safe. In their mind, taking a murderer off the streets is keeping the streets safe. And in some cases, it doesn't matter if it's taking the murderer off the street or if it's just saying we got the murderer and not really taking that guy off the street, putting somebody else away and saying, hey, we got him.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence, this and that. You see all these crimes overturned by DNA evidence now that this guy spent 30 years in jail. This guy died in jail 50 years ago. We found out that he never was even there. He never even did it. Doesn't matter. It's all circumstantial. You need a lawyer because you don't speak cop. Lawyers do. That's what it is. Even if it's a public defender and you don't pay a dime, get a fucking lawyer. Get a fucking lawyer. Don't say a fucking word. That's it. That's all I got. Comes from the heart.
This has been Don't Start Me Talking. I'm Rick Owens.
I'm Bennie Williams.
And shut the fuck up.
Stupid. Don't fucking talk to cops. Ever. I mean, if there's I don't know, if there's a cop and you're walking down the street, you can go like, oh, yeah. Just like you would with anybody else if you make eye contact. Just like, oh,
yeah.
Fucking forget that you exist. What?